Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be covering the top 10 meta Pokemon trading card game decks for the month of May 2024. This is going to be more of an update video regarding the standings and the ups and downs of particular decks. If you'd like to see a lot of these decks covered in more detail, talking about their playstyles and more, I'll leave the link in the description down below to the top 10 meta decks of the month. Coming in at number 10, we have Turbo Iron Hands or Future Hands. This is a deck that I really should be playing this deck, especially since Temporal Forces has been out for a while now, but I just can't stop playing Miraidon Regieleki. I'm having too much fun with that deck. The deck you're looking at on screen right now is played by Yuho Kalama at EUIC, and this list is super good, very consistent. If you want to turbo through your opponents and try and donk them, or well, maybe not donk them, but amp you very much a whole bunch, this is a deck that you might want to try out. This deck is the most popular way to play with the future archetype of Pokemon, so if you like Iron Hands, if you like Miraidon, if you like Iron Crown, this deck is a no-brainer. Future Hands was much higher up on this list last time we did a video like this, but Charizard is just so strong and really raising in popularity. I think we saw like a 25% or 30% meta share of Charizard EX at Indianapolis. So if you played Future Box or just Future Turbo Hands, you probably got farmed by a lot of those Charizards out there. And so yeah, there's also just like not a lot of really good players playing Future Hands, because why would you play this deck when there's so many other better options out there that don't kind of auto lose to Charizard? So if you're a good player, you're probably not wanting to take an auto loss necessarily to Charizard EX. So that's why it's fallen to number 10. Coming in at number 9 is a deck that I also had much higher in the initial rankings of this month. We have Gardevoir EX. Yeah, Gardevoir is still around, hanging out in the top 10. It's almost kicked out of the top 10, but it's still here. I think Gardevoir is just one of those decks that will never go away. And the fact that, you know, those Iron Hands decks are dwindling in popularity, other than seeing it in probably Chien-Pao the most, Gardevoir has a really solid matchup spread across the board with a lot of decks. And this deck really just comes down to the individual skill level of the players playing it, because the skill ceiling for this deck is very high, and it has a solid fight against Charizard. It's not horrible against Chien-Pao. It has several answers in text that work out against other decks in the format, and Gardevoir is also very cheap as well. The list you guys are looking at right now was played by Joshua Frink that got 3rd place at the Orlando Regional Championship Tournament. Coming in at number 8 is the go-to budget deck out there, and the go-to single prize deck right now. We got Ancient Box. This deck here was played by Jake Ewart that got 2nd place at the Orlando Regional Championships. If you love ancient Pokemon or single prize Pokemon or just budget decks, this is the deck that you should try out. It has a decent matchup spread across the board. The Charizard matchups though are a little sketchy at times, and also with Chien-Pao raising in popularity, Roaring Moon paired with the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule is very annoying for those kinds of decks, and it's just a very annoying number. 200 HP and only taking one single prize if your opponent knocks it out is a lot to deal with, and the reward of one prize isn't very appealing. Ancient Box is very strong, and I'd recommend it honestly if you're like a newer player or a budget player, or you just like single prize Pokemon. Coming in at number 7, we have Arceus Giratina VSTAR. Still a very strong deck, very popular deck, but it didn't see as much success as I was expecting it to see at the Indianapolis Regionals. It performed very well in Orlando with, I believe, 5 of my local friends and players here in the Greater Toronto area all making day 2 with the same 60 card list. So that's the list you guys are looking at right here, right now. The highest placing player at Orlando Regionals with the Arctina list was Sashi, and that's my teammate from Comfy Hobbies. So by the way, if you guys want to buy Pokemon cards at all, check out comfyhobbies.com. Use code SneakerTalk for 5% off. Shout out to Sashi, who got 11th at the Orlando Regionals with this list, and it proves that, like, they proved my whole friends, the crew that rocked this list, it proves that it's really good, because if they all made day 2 with it, that's like a 100% conversion rate for like 5 people who ran all the same 60. Give this list a try. Very simple, very straightforward. On to our number 6 list. We got Giratina VSTAR in here again, but this time it's paired with the Lost Zone engine. And now this is a deck that has a much more higher skill ceiling compared to Arceus Giratina, because of course you are using the Lost Zone engine. You get to play with the Cramorant, the Sableye, and of course all those comfies for all the painful annoying flower selectings you're going to have to make throughout the game. The list you're looking at right now got second place at the European International Championships by Isaiah Bradner. His whole crew, I believe, ran this list and they all performed pretty well with it as well. This deck is one of those like good neutral decks that have very solid like a 50-50 matchup spread across the board for a lot of decks. However, you can also tech these kind of Lost Zone Giratina decks out to, you know, answer certain decks that you might want to, or you're expecting to see more and more of. So like they have the Iron Leaves in here to deal with the Charizards a little easier. They have the Banette and Shuppet line in here as well to help with some added consistency, but also allow for some item lock annoyance against other decks out there like Chien-Pao and of course Charizard too. And also Lost Zone Giratina has always been a pretty solid deck through every single format. You just gotta make sure you select the right flowers when it comes to comfy time, and you also gotta hope that your opponents don't hit you with rough cards like Eerie to discard cards like Mirage Gate from your hand. One last thing to mention about Lost Giratina is that I've seen numerous players actually experiment teching in other cards other than like Iron Leaves and Banette. I've seen some versions also play with Force Heal Stone, and they've even been putting in Raikou V in there too. There's lots of different ways to play Giratina. Pick the one that works for you, or pick the one that you think is the right meta call. On to number 5. We're still going to be stuck here in the Lost Zone. However, I'm very happy to talk about this list because it was actually piloted by 2 of our locals here in the Greater Toronto area to amazing success in Indianapolis, and an American player as well. This version of Lost Zone box has all the typical, you know, cards you'd see in a Lost Zone deck. However, the attackers are the big standout things in this case. We got Hoopo EX, we got Iron Hands EX, and we got Raikou V, along with Roaring Moon EX and Greninja. There's just like all these amazing one-off attackers that really can do a lot of damage given the right circumstances in the game, and of course it has a lot of variety in it. So if you're going to be trying to hit certain decks for weakness, it also kind of becomes like a anti-meta or a weakness box that you can kind of play around with. And if you are a very big brain player, then this deck is going to really be able to deliver the skill expression and you know, just really you can pop off with it. That's what I'm trying to say. We actually got to interview the homie Jackson Ford as well for the Indianapolis Regionals, so you're gonna get to hear from him a little bit about the deck and how his tournament run went. But obviously you guys know he did really well. He did end up getting 14th place. Typically I'm not really a big fan of Lost Zone decks. I don't like the pain of Colress Experiment and the flower selectings very much. I'll typically play Lost Zone Giratina if I'm going to play a Lost Zone deck. However, after seeing the homie Jackson Ford do so well with it, I'm going to give this deck some love. I'm going to give this deck a try and see how far I can go with it as well on the ladder and maybe locally too. On to deck number 4. This is a deck that really popped off at Indianapolis. There was quite a uptick in popularity and success with this deck going into Indy, and then at Indy it was popping off. It was crazy. It also was dominating in the seniors division as well, and that's because the players who were playing this deck were also, you know, close to some of these seniors. They're in Discord groups and stuff. Even if they coach them too, they're going to be getting access to the list from the Masters. A lot of work went into this list by Gabe Smart and some other top players as well. I kind of look at this deck almost like a Steel type Miraidon, because you guys know I love hitting my electric generators, and Matang is basically an electric generator but in the form of a stage 1 Pokemon. So you get to set up multiple Matangs and then hopefully hit some energies, and then your Dialga VSTAR will eventually be able to swing for Star Chronos and then take an extra turn. And then you also have some single prize action in there too with the Zamazenta from Crown Zenith. So if you are in an area with a lot of Chien-Pao, this is a deck that's pretty solid into Chien-Pao. I mean, it did end up beating Chien-Pao in the grand finals, which you have to watch. The finals was insane. And I'm sure there's just like a lot of Dialga fans out there. So if you go to locals this week, expect to see some Dialgas there. There's no way you're not going to see some Dialgas. And also, the prices of Dialgas is going up. Dialga V, Dialga V-Star, whatever it is, they're going up. Congratulations to Andrew Hedrick as well for getting first place at the Indianapolis Regionals with this list. If you want to play Dialga, this is a great list to use. And best of all, Andrew Hedrick did play on stream a couple of games during the streams, during the regional tournaments. So if you want to kind of get some like lessons, kind of like a little masterclass tutorial on how to play it, you can go back and watch the regionals and see how Andrew pilots the deck and make some notes. You might be wondering what took so long for Dialga to become this powerhouse of a deck, and it was basically just it needed the right amount of high caliber players to really put the hours and put the work in to make this list thrive. Dialga never really saw much success at this level until now, and that's just because a lot of players weren't giving it the respect it could necessarily deserve. We're also now in a pretty popular, pretty Chien-Pao dominant meta as well, outside of Charizard. And so if you're able to hit those Chien-Paos, it's definitely one of those matchups you're kind of excited to see in some cases. And it's also a deck that can really pop off with Star Chronos, because you can be behind, but if you end up doing a Star Chronos attack and KO a 2-prizer, and then you're taking another turn, and then you either just boss or prime catcher up another 2-prizer, bam, that's 4 prizes in essentially 1 turn. That's kind of busted. Not too many decks are able to respond to something of that nature. But yeah, if you're a fan of steel type Pokemon, if you're a fan of Dialga, if you like Miraidon and you want to like get that feeling, that sensation of hitting electric generators again, but not have to be worried about Charizard as much, definitely give Dialga some love and see how it goes for you. Let me know how many extra turns you take this week. On to deck number 3, we got Pidgeot EX Control. This is another powerhouse of a deck that was also piloted by a bunch of top players at the Indianapolis Regionals. The exact 60 card deck you guys are looking at right now was played by 4 top players, and they all placed amazingly high. Of course, we got Azul Garcia Griego, Azul GG, getting 28th place with this list. We got Ryan Antonucci, who also won a regional a couple of months ago with Gardevoir EX. Ryan got 19th place. We also have Caleb Gittimer getting 10th place, and the highest placement with this list was played by Grant Manley, getting 4th at the Indy Regionals. Now, Pidgeot EX is not a deck for the faint of heart. It is a very hard deck to pilot, I want to say. The skill expression is really high up there. You gotta really know this deck in and out. You also really want to know the meta, the win conditions, the lose conditions for everything. There's a lot of one-off copies in this deck, so having that quick search from Pidgeot EX is critical. So if you're fighting against this deck, you want to gun down that Pidgeot or Pidgey ASAP, and if you're playing this deck, you want to set that Pidgeot up as soon as possible. This deck has a lot of disruption and annoyance involved with it to really make your opponent hate you, so if you don't want to make any friends, a fantastic deck to play. And best of all, this deck features a Pokemon that we really haven't seen much of at all since its release in any form of competitiveness or a competitive deck. We got Wigglytuff EX in here, which is really cool. It pairs well with the energies in this deck because we have the double turbos, the fire, the mist, and Wigglytuff EX does take advantage of its 3 colorless attack cost with that. And of course, since you do play a bunch of special energies in this deck, the Wigglytuff EX is just an absolute tank. It's a massive unit, and so after it's taken up some damage, absorbed it, you could say, you can use those really great cards like Sharon's Care to just pick it up and annoy your opponent because all their hard work was for nothing. This version of like Pidgeot EX that I'm looking at, it looks fantastic. I'm definitely going to give this a try. I think I've already made enough friends in my life. Onto our second highest placing list on the top 10, we got Charizard EX. Yes, it's fallen from greatness. What a time to be alive. It's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. Now, although it did have the highest meta share at the Indianapolis Regionals, a lot of the top players, as I mentioned, they weren't playing Charizard. Because I guess Charizard had such a huge target on its back. A lot of top players were playing other decks out there like Dialga that we mentioned earlier, and other decks too like Chien-Pao as well. But yeah, Charizard is still super popular. It's still very strong. If you are going to play this deck, I think the most important thing you're going to need to know is how to navigate your way through the mirror match, because you're likely to hit a couple of mirror matches with this deck if you are popping off and doing well. The list you're looking at right here is the Charizard with the maximum belt A spec. The 60 card list you are looking at right now was played by a few players at Indy, but the highest placing one was in top 8, getting 8th place, played by Ian Robb, another big top player in the game. It looks like Charizard's going to continue to rock with the Pidgeot and Bibarel line in here, along with the Cleffa and Rotom, so not much has changed there. And Charizard is just one of the strongest and most consistent decks in the game, so it's just all about getting that set up. You really don't care too much if your opponent is taking prizes, because of course that escalates and makes your Charizard stronger and stronger as the game goes by. And yeah, I think it's about time I put these Charizard sleeves to use, because I've just had these sitting on my desk and I really should at least put a couple of games into Charizard. But yeah, luckily for me though, Charizard's popularity is expecting to go down once the new set Twilight Masquerade comes out, and we'll talk about that more in a future video, I guess. But just a heads up, Pokemon Company actually finally reached out to your boy, and they sent me a booster box of the Twilight Masquerade set, along with an ETB. So I'll be opening that on Friday morning if you guys want to subscribe for that video. Now on to the #1 Pokemon trading card game deck right now this week for the month of May. we have Chien-Pao EX. Yeah, Chien-Pao has finally climbed to number 1. It took a while, but with the powerhouse of players that are piloting the exact same 60 card list event after event, it is no surprise that it was able to get this high up and get to the peak of this list. And I, for one, I am for it. I am tired of seeing Charizard at number 1. I'm also a big Miraidon player, and so Miraidon has a solid matchup into Chien-Pao. It's like a 60-40 into Chien-Pao, so I'm just super excited to see Chien-Pao do well. I'm low-key or I'm high-key hoping that more and more people pick it up so I can just farm them with Miraidon. A lot of different players played this list and got a lot of high placements, so here's just a screenshot of the list of players and the placements that it got. But the big players that are really piloting this deck and really innovating and making this deck work, we got Lucas Singh, Grant Shen, John Eng, and Reagan Retzloff. And Grant Shen got the highest placement at Indianapolis with the 60 card list, getting 2nd place. And Reagan actually got 4th place with the same 60 at Orlando. And Reagan also got 15th with the same 60 at this event at Indianapolis as well. And it really just is crazy to see how successful this specific 60 card list of Chien-Pao is. It's kind of reminding me a bit now of how Reagan Retzloff also popped off with Lugia, and then everybody was taking his list and just running with it and doing so well. Same with how Ross Carlton also did so well with Roy Mooniax, and everyone just took that exact 60 and just kept performing with it so well. So if you're gonna play Chien-Pao, you don't know where to start, or if you have been playing Chien-Pao, rock this list. It works, it's proven. I think it's got over $30,000 or $20,000 in prizing in the last 2 major events alone. If you guys want to see a full breakdown of a lot of the decks that are in the top 10 meta right now, you can click on screen to check that video out. And if you guys want to see my prize pack series for a booster box, you can click on screen to check it out right here. I just dropped it today. Check it out, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.